light within my heart, light within my thoughts, light within my words. May one and all and everything, blessed and loved, ever be. Welcome. I am Sister Who. Today I wanted to offer a few reflections on relationships between the citizenry or the people of a country or nation or region and their government. It seems that from time to time we run into situations where politicians or administrators, or for that matter even in families, where parents think they need to protect their children or the politicians need to protect their citizens from full information about a particular subject. It gets a bit more controversial in the case of parents and children, I understand, and yet having grown up around farm families, I know growing up we pretty much saw everything and understood everything, and it really wasn't, knowledge about life wasn't something from which we needed to be protected. Rather, what we needed was instruction or guidance or mentoring, if you will, in how to respond and how to deal effectively with the challenges we encountered. There are so many different examples in so many different directions we could go with this discussion. The one that suddenly popped into my mind was as far as having gay and lesbian people in military forces, something that has been extremely controversial in the United States of America for quite a number of years, and only recently was finally officially changed, at least administratively and legislatively. But I don't know what, if any, programs have been created or employed to facilitate the transition. I recall reading, however, that in the Netherlands, when they decided to integrate their military, they actually created educational programs for everyone in the military about relating to gay and lesbian people, in the same way that they would have introduced any cultural minority or religious minority or any other marginalized population, so that the majority of the military received all this education and training in relating to these different sorts of people. And apparently, from what I read, they didn't encounter any problems whatsoever in creating a fully integrated military that had men and women and gay and straight and lesbian all doing their job together, and everyone was fine with it. In some situations where there have been problems, I think it's specifically because people wanted to play elephant in the living room and pretend there was no problem, that we're all adults here, so everything will be fine. No education is needed, no sensitivity training is needed, nobody needs to know anything, we're just all going to behave ourselves and we'll be fine. And it rarely works out that way, because there are all these points of confusion, the day-to-day, presumably ordinary situations that, because they're unfamiliar, the individuals who find themselves in those situations don't actually know how to handle. I suppose it would be similar to if there had ever been, which there wasn't, a fire in my elementary school. If no fire drills had ever been practiced, we wouldn't have known what to do, and everybody would have panicked, and there would have been screaming and confusion and people hiding or not knowing where to go or where the nearest exit was, or all sorts of things. Because we had fire drills and we practiced lining up quickly, leaving everything right where it was, and marching quickly but in an orderly manner out of the building to a designated place where the teacher could verify that we were all there, and that everybody had made it out of the building. Because we already knew what to do, had there ever been a fire, it would not have been a reason for panic. To the extent that people are kept in ignorance, that information is withheld, that unfamiliar situations are allowed to hit us in well, as the expression goes, that I was blindsided by whatever. The idea being that there is a part of what goes on around us that we can't see because it's too far out of our range of vision. So if something were to come at us from that direction, we wouldn't see it. And so in a sense, we would be blindsided, we'd be blind to the approaching danger. If someone was throwing a ball at our head, for example, from the side, but our peripheral vision wasn't aimed in such a way that we could see it approaching. In a similar sort of way, we have public news media, newspapers, television, and now, of course, a myriad of ways of getting information over the internet. We have talking to each other, all these different ways that we can learn about what's going on and for what do I need to prepare. If that communication doesn't happen, though, or if someone thinks, well, we can't tell so-and-so about this because he won't be able to handle it, or he'll panic, or something. It is a common choice that the person will be left in ignorance, and the people around will try to protect that person from what they think that person can't handle. The problem being that if something ever, a crisis situation, if something ever occurs, and for whatever reason that circle of people are ineffective, and word gets through to that person in the center, and he panics because he doesn't know how to handle it, because he's been kept in ignorance all that time. There could be loss of life, there could be a major disaster that didn't need to occur at all. Similar to a person being caught in a building and when a fire breaks out and not knowing where the fire exit is. Okay, fine, we're not supposed to use the elevator, where is the stairs? I've been in numerous apartment buildings where the path to the stairs is not clearly marked. If there had been a fire and the fire alarms had gone off, I wouldn't have known how to get out and I would have panicked. Specifically because of the ignorance, not because of the fire. It is not ultimately the danger itself that is the problem, but it is our ignorance about the danger, that we don't know what to do and we don't know how to respond. We don't know how to deal with any number of situations, cross-cultural situations, disaster situations, situations of dealing with unfamiliar people or situations. A friend who is blind since birth, or who is blind since birth, and I went to a department store once to get something for her, and as we're going through the store, apparently blind people were so seldom seen in this store that the people had absolutely no idea how to respond. No one had ever taught them or told them. And because they didn't know what to do, they were literally leaping out of our paths. And when we found the item and got it and went to the checkout, everyone fled from our path once again, and we didn't have to wait in line. We simply walked up to the register and made the purchase and left the store. But even while we're making the purchase, the cashier was leaning away from the counter as if she was afraid of catching some horrible disease, which of course is not what blindness is. I described all this to my friend after we got out of the store, and she said, well, they should have been trained better. And I agreed that yes, they should have been trained better, but it was also the basic issue that not many blind people shop at the store, so there's not much opportunity to practice. But the training could have been done, that if you ever see a blind person, this is a way to interact. Begin by describing everything you're doing, because they can't see you doing it. They have to have you describe what is happening, because they are listening to everything. In the case of my friend, she also had particular ways that she folded dollar bills so that she would know by feeling it whether it was a $5 bill or a $10 bill or what. All these different steps of organization made it manageable. In a similar sort of way, whether it's an international situation or a regional situation, if there had been, which there wasn't, any truth to the whole McCarthyism scare of communist sympathizers, not that in and of itself that's necessarily a bad thing, but But at that time, the general population equated sympathizing with communism to being part of the governmental push to create communist nations all over, the political military entities behind the communism. The assumption was made that they would want to conquer the world because, of course, by that time, we had several thousand years of various examples of humanity always trying to conquer each other instead of negotiating or forming coalitions or dealing with each other on economic and social and informational levels the way more often happens now. Because of all that past precedent, the assumption, of course, was that anyone who's different, that on some level every government and every military wants to conquer somebody, wants to ultimately conquer everybody. I like to think we're coming out of that kind of understanding of international relations and that humanity will, for the most part, leave that behind. Along with that transition, though, I think it is becoming more and more imperative for governments to be completely open and transparent with their citizenry, that we will know whether a politician is doing his job or not because we'll know everything about what the politician is doing. And we will know whether we are on good terms with this or that country around the world because we will know the agreements and the relationships we have with that country. And we will finally understand that spying on each other specifically destroys trust rather than creating it. And it's very difficult to create sufficient trust to collaborate with someone if up until that point you've been spying on them and attempting to use the information you found in ways that were beneficial to self and adversarial to them. It is in everyone's best interest for the age of government secrecy to end and for the government of the people, by the people, and for the people to be the reality that by understanding what our politicians are doing, we can hold them accountable to doing a good job, but we can also support them in doing their job. That when a new congressperson finds themselves dealing with a very adversarial system that is working against them and working against the re-election, that the constituency, the people who voted them in the first place, can be informed about this and say to them, we are standing with you and we don't care who else doesn't approve. As long as we still have the ability to vote, we will keep electing you. So stand up for what's right, speak the truth, do what you need to do, and if anyone insists that you can't be that bold because it will cost you re-election, they're wrong, because we're the ones responsible for your re-election, and we've decided that we will re-elect you as long as you tell the truth, stand up for what's right, do a good job, and don't buy into all the game playing and the manipulations of the citizenry, the lies that the American people are told for the sake of political expediency, for the sake of political convenience. If the elected personnel, if the elected persons know that they have the support of their constituents, that the constituents are thinking and believing and committed to supporting that person, rather than being swayed by every wild, outlandish headline that the news media might put out, that the citizens check things out and make decisions on facts, rather than being swayed by commercials funded by lobbyists. Then finally we have one little toehold, I suppose, in pushing our national government in a positive direction. The advantage of everything, another advantage of everything being transparent, though, is that if anything should happen to that particular elected politician, congressman, senator, that if everybody in that region knows what was going on because everything was done in a very transparent fashion, essentially almost anyone could step in to fill the position and take the next turn at bat, so to speak, so that they could keep things moving in a positive direction. Because it really ultimately should not be about who is in the office, but rather in how the particular office is managed or expressed, or how the duties of that office are performed. Because information is shared, anyone can fill the role, so consequently it becomes very difficult to fight that, because no matter who you eliminate, there's always another person ready to step in and take up the challenge and fill the role and keep things going. To the extent that one person and only one person, or only 2 or 3 people, know what's really going on, if those people are eliminated, all the information that only they knew dies with them, and can throw the entire system into jeopardy, because nobody will know how to carry on or what to do next. Going back to our earlier metaphor, if the building is on fire and there's only one person who knows the fire exit route, and that person is sick at home that day because they had a bad cold or twisted their ankle on the playground or whatever, suddenly you have a room full of people and nobody knows the way out, because that information, that knowledge, was only held by one person. If everybody in the room knows, it doesn't really matter who you eliminate, because everybody left in the room still knows how to get out. In a similar sort of way, it doesn't really matter who is in the national legislature or the state legislature or the municipal government. If everybody knows what's going on, knows what the system is supposed to do, knows what is or isn't happening, every time, for any reason whatsoever, that somebody can't fill that position, there's 100, 1,000, maybe 1,000,000 other people standing in line who can step in and fill that position effectively, immediately, with very, very little notice, because of the transparency, because the information is generalized, because so many people know, because there are not secrets, because spying on each other isn't happening, and there's no reason for spying if everything is open and above board, and everybody knows anyway. Well, if everybody knows anyway, what are you spying for? There's nothing else to learn that isn't already known. Without the spying, we then can trust each other because of the distribution of information, because we have been educated in how to respond to someone who doesn't speak our language, because we know what to do in a medical emergency, because we know that the fact that somebody dresses differently doesn't mean they're a bad person, because we know how to begin to create collaborative relationships, even with the most unusual person, the one who is more different from us than anyone we've ever met. That means that we are strong, that as a community, there is no way to stop us until there is literally no one left. There is no way to have us trapped inside a burning building, unable to get to the fire exit, because we all know where it is. It's recognizing that communal strength will always be greater than military strength, will always be greater than individual strength. That it is specifically by working together, specifically by putting all the knowledge we possess together, that one person knows one fire escape route, another person knows another one. We start for the first one and then discover that the way is blocked because of part of the building has collapsed in flames already. That's when the other person can speak up and say, I know an alternative route, follow me. And everybody turns and follows that person, because they have already built up the trust. If there are secrets, if there is information that's withheld, if that dependency upon that 1 or 2 persons is allowed to remain, then when the first option doesn't work, the second option may not be available. And if the first and second options aren't available, you then have a building full of people in a building that's burning. There's still people there, and they don't know what to do, because none of them is familiar with the layout of the building or where the exits are or anything. And it becomes a bigger disaster than it would otherwise have had to be. It is consequently in everyone's best interest to be as well informed as possible, to share information as much as possible, as much as appropriate, I suppose. But very often people use the word appropriate to restrict information. And the problem with restricting information, of course, is it shifts the power balance between one person and another. If one person knows and the other person doesn't, it creates dependency, and it creates paralysis and inability to effectively resolve a challenging situation. By educating each other in how to respond to this or that situation, even if it seems redundant, it's always better to be redundant than to leave something unsaid that would be indispensable information, that would be essential information in a particular situation. As an American citizen, I can't always do something about the problems that exist within the media, but it does make sense, to the best of my ability, to know what I can so that I have the ability to respond constructively to whatever situation unfolds. If, for example, I know that there is construction on a particular highway, I can know to look for an alternative route. If there is a government official who genuinely wants to know what his constituents are thinking in a particular area or on a particular subject, hopefully that news report would also include the information necessary to actually contact that statesman. The challenge, I guess, is whether it's news media or politicians or military leaders, those who seek to control the power and control the influence, control the information, not accepting or believing or willing to accept responsibility for the fact that they are threatening the possible survival of the community. That by withholding the information, they may be keeping the people afraid and consequently much more able to manipulation by themselves. The problem with keeping people afraid and allowing them to remain able to be manipulated or controlled by oneself is that a similar sort of dynamic exists between the people and any potential tyrant or adversary. That in the same way, one military may keep the people afraid and tell them, you need to do this. If a contrasting military is invading and needs to control those people, they will already know to what they respond. What would defeat both of those scenarios, of course, is educating the people to know what to do in the event of such situation, even if nobody can give you a clear order that is what you should do, or even if no one can confirm that's what you should do. If you know basics of fire safety, if you know basics of self-defense, if you know basics of surviving on very little, then you will be one of those who comes through whatever crisis occurs and, essentially leads the way and sets an example for others to follow. That sort of strength that is demonstrated, that is most likely even empowered by the fact that you are not the only one who does know. That if it's a 3-person job, if the entire citizenry has been educated and nurtured and supported in developing themselves to work, to collaborate and to work effectively together, then instead of the strength of 1, you have the strength of 3. And instead of the strength of a few dozen, you begin to have the strength of an army for those situations in which it is actually needed. The wild card in all of this, of course, is the definition of what is actually needed. And the unfortunate weakness of some to decide that what is actually needed is little enough that they are able to exercise a unrecommendable amount of manipulation or control. The problem, of course, is that the tyrants and politicians and those who control the information think they're smart enough to stay one step ahead of life and of Mother Nature and of developments in the world. And again and again and again and again we find that they're not. That even for themselves there are things that they didn't anticipate. That they may have been planning to become the ruler, they become the king of the world in their latter years of life and rule over everything in peace, except that they don't know the people of the world well enough to know what they need to be able to actually accomplish any sort of peace. And that's just one wild example. But the point being, it's working together that makes us strong. It's being honest and allowing politicians and administrators to withhold information, to keep their citizens afraid, and to control and manipulate situations. It sets a course for our own self-destruction. It sets a course for weakness because it depends on so few people instead of being supported by the masses. In any case, I hope these thoughts are helpful to you. It is a complex subject, and clearly there is a lot of work to be done. It seems to me that in order for it to be done with wisdom and with unconditional love, it's going to take all of us working together. I hope that the thoughts that I've shared over the last half hour have been helpful to you. Clearly, having a civilization, being a country, being a people, is a very complex undertaking that requires the harmony of enormous diversity. Specifically because of that diversity, however, we do best when we are most governed by truth. Thank you very much for watching.